So let's start out with yesterday's horrific shooting is unfortunately something that many kids growing up these days are hearing about a lot more frequently than maybe people my age. I'm 40. So how do parents start to have these conversations and talk to kids about it?
Well, I can definitely answer some of that even from personal experience. I have a child of my own that is just a little bit older than the two that have passed away. And with her, it's one of those conversations where she wanted to know why I had to do an interview. And I said, well, sweetheart, there was another shooting. And I shared with her just briefly. One of the biggest things is to communicate with our kids and to ask them, what have you heard? Clarifying any information that they've heard, and then giving them a place to share their feelings. As I was tucking her into bed last night after we said our prayers, she said, Mom, if that was my school, I don't know that I would want to go back. And then I validated that for her and said, that would be very scary, but education is very important. And you and I would walk through that together. But let's pray for those kids and for those parents who are navigating that right now, because there may be kids that don't want to go back. And so, really kind of validating and giving, particularly children, the chance to share whatever they're doing. Each of our kiddos is going to have a different reaction just by their very nature of being different kiddos. And so, a lot of it is that natural kind of allowing them to bring up and then giving them chances to express themselves. But then I give the three C's, which I just did: communication, consistency, letting kids know that we're going to always be there for them and that we're going to continue to answer questions for them. Also telling them, I said, let them know we'll always be there, but unfortunately we can't promise that, but letting them know who else can be there. Like consistently having adults in their lives that they can go to if we are not present. And then comfort. Comfort is the other one that we sometimes take for granted and we forget, oh, I needed a hug. My child needs a hug. I ate chocolate and just comforted myself. Maybe my kid needs some ice cream. Not that we want to always use food for comfort, but in my family, we use ice cream for comfort. And so, kind of just allowing parents to even simplify it themselves of, okay, I know how to communicate. I can be consistent. I can comfort my child. Because really, in a trauma, those are the three most important.
Absolutely. And, I want to touch on what you mentioned, allowing kids to, and this goes for any age, right? I mean, they don't
Mm-hmm.
just have to be young children. These could
No,
be teenagers who are,
yeah.
almost into
Mine's a
adulthood,
preteen.
even.
So she's a
Yeah,
preteen going on 20 some days and other days being 5. So,
exactly. I think touching on allowing children teens to ask questions that maybe, what's your take on maybe if it's difficult as an adult to answer, or you don't have the answer, but kind of showing honesty through that? Because I think
yes.
kids especially kind of can read when
Oh,
you maybe aren't
I say
being
that in my
transparent.
classes. I say they can read you. Do not fake it with a teenager. Don't fake it with a child. They read fake so fast. And so I think that's a great question of, okay, what do you say when you don't know what to say? I think you say that. You say, kiddo, I don't really know how to answer that question. And I don't know why these horrible things have to happen. I do know that for me, it's faith. I'll say, I do know that God loves us and that He is as heartbroken as we are right now. And we really need to try to figure out what we can do to help you feel safe right now or to validate, what are you feeling? Are you angry? How can you express that? And then validate and help them go back and say, how do you think you would feel safer? So with my daughter, I said, what do you think would help you go back to school? And she was like, well, if I knew that that couldn't happen. And I said, well, how would you know it couldn't happen? She goes, well, my school has a um, gun. What is that? Metal detector. I couldn't think of the word.
That's okay.
And I said, okay, so you know that somebody couldn't get in your school with a metal detector. She goes, yeah, and I think our windows are bulletproof. And so for her, it was this very tactile For other kids, it may be very vague. It may be, okay, well, I would feel safer if I could carry a picture of you with me, or I would feel safer if I knew I could call you, or I would feel safer if I knew that my teacher had a plan for us. And so they may have to go to school and say, hey, what's the plan if X, Y, or Z happens? And so again, it's individualized, but really answering for the child that sometimes I don't know, but I'm going to help you figure it out. Let's figure it out together.
That I love that. Absolutely love that. This is a question that I'm hoping you can shed some light on. I think many people at this point have seen the interview with one particular 10-year-old uh, yesterday who was very almost shockingly composed and probably in shock as he talked about his friend, covering him up, him hiding, but his friend getting shot. Um, and he talked about these drills, right? And again, kind of going back to when I was a kid, we had tornado drills, we had
Right. We didn't
fire
have
drills.
lockdown drills.
We did not have shooter drills.
Even just
And
6 years ago, they were rare. And I had a client that had a reaction to a drill because she thought it was real. And that was something that was new even as a clinician for me to help someone get through. And that was 6 years ago. And I'm like, how much it's changed.
yeah, and so I guess that's kind of my question, especially in seeing again, probably a lot of it from shock, but how composed this 10-year-old was and how articulate he was in talking about this experience. But, you know, can you explain anything psychologically, what these
So,
drills do? And I mean that they're needed, they're good, right? I mean, I think
mhm.
we know they're needed. But what can these even drills do psychologically?
So good and bad, like anything. I mean, one of the things is that because of the drills and because of the reality that this little boy, I mean, I don't know this little boy. I did see that interview where he said, my friend saved my life and he got hit. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so, but children are also very factual at the age of 10. And so, especially boys, girls are a little more emotional than boys are, but boys will be very just account and very factual. And so some of that has to do with the fact that he's known drills before. Some of it might be his personality. Um, but I want to answer about the drills. I think it prepares our kids, similar to the fact that every single time we get on an airplane, they say, should the airplane go down? Da, 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 da. This is what you do. And if we haven't had those drills in the moment of the panic, no child knows what to do. And so I hate that we have to have them, but at the same time, I think from a psychological point of view, it's very necessary that we do have them and that children understand, hey, this is what we're going to do. I also think in some cases, it actually increases the child's safety of, oh, I know what my school's going to do should this have to happen because they've heard a news report. It unfortunately is not something that most kids aren't aware of that somebody can bring a gun. And so I like it from the most point, but it does. It makes kids very matter of fact about a horrific violence that we're like, wait a minute, a lockdown drill? No. And so there's pros and cons, but I think they are necessary.
Absolutely. And I want to pivot, if possible, a little bit.
Okay.
I wanted to get into some things that people, especially adults, can look for different signs that may be noticeable in someone that's struggling, or we all struggle,
Right.
in life, but struggling
Yes.
to a point of getting to a point of possibly doing something like this.
Okay.
And in that, if you can touch on, I think enough studies have been done and research that does show that the majority of these shooters are in their late teens, early 20s, and many of them are white males as well.
Okay.
I think if we look at data, kind of touching on that. So I don't know if there's a way you could explain what is happening with people's brains a lot of times at that age,
Yeah,
range.
that adolescent age.
Yeah. And then also if you could go into signs that we can look for and what we can do better as just members of society.
Okay. Yep, I think I can.
And sorry, I know that was
No,
throwing
that's
a lot
okay. That's a
at you.
big pivot, but I'm kind of like pulling from my adolescence class. Okay, so um, if I understand what you're asking, a lot of these shooters, as you have noted, have unfortunately been in that kind of late adolescence age, that 18 to 24. We're now saying late 25, maybe even early 30s. And what we know about that stage of development is that they're still absolutely looking for a place to belong. In that stage of development, naturally, psychologically, that age of a young person is looking for a way to make an impact on the world. And unfortunately, it would appear that in this case, or in some of the other cases, that impact has taken a dark turn. There has been um, an interjection of them not understanding how they could make a positive impact. And because of their own, whether it's mental health, whether it's their own darkness or their own struggles with not understanding how to relate, that can turn very violent. And so it is part of that stage. That doesn't mean that everyone that is that age goes through that stage. The majority, I work at a college, and thankfully at our college, a lot of those students are trying to make an impact on the world in positive ways. And so, but you can see, as you shared, some of the data shows that a lot of these individuals are right in that stage where they haven't necessarily entered emerging adulthood yet.
Great. And what are some of the things that family members, friends, um, might notice, even if it seems subtle, to maybe give you enough pause that maybe someone needs to be alerted to this?
I think definitely looking at themes of violence, looking at um, dark themes. I mean, a lot has emerged just in this incidence of YouTube videos that apparently were, at least if I understand correctly, posted that nobody really was alerted to, but paying attention to, especially I want to speak to friends of individuals. Um, there is a lot in our world, and unfortunately, it's getting worse and worse that we have access to really violent video games. We have access to all kinds of technology to pull information. My understanding is that he had studied previous shooters. I mean, he even had Whitman on his gun, and that's one of the ones that's the Texas massacre from years ago that we touch on in one of my psychology classes, where that young man actually had a brain tumor and he knew something was wrong with him and had asked for help, but didn't get it until unfortunately after he was posthumously they found the brain tumor. But being able to recognize, how do we help these young people with the signs? Some of that is weighed in on professionals. Some of it, parents want to help. Sometimes these teenagers, unfortunately, and adolescents can hide it from parents. And so we can't put all of the weight on parents either. And so it's a mix of, how do we help our society recognize how they can make an impact in positive ways?
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. That really helps. And, sometimes I know just from living enough life that sometimes you're around someone, let's say at work or in different areas of your life, who may have what you feel like is a little awkward personality or a very different personality from yourself. But is it sometimes recognizing the need to maybe slow down and listen to people?
Yes. So slowing down is super important. Also, just clarifying with someone. I can think of a situation several years back where I was walking out of my church, and a parishioner was walking out and was like, "You guys are never going to see me again. I'm never ever you. This is it. I'm gone." And I'm like, I called him afterwards. I was like, "What did you mean by that? I need to know what you meant." And he's like, "Well, I just meant that I'm not going to come back to church there." And he's like, "But I probably am." And he did later. He was just having an off day and he was upset about something that had been said to him. And he came back, but I just kind of was like, I can't leave that hanging. And so I think that's something that we can all do, whether we're counselors or not. If someone says something that kind of seems off to you, ask them, hey, what do you mean by that? You okay? Can we go grab coffee? Are you feeling all right today? Is there something I can do? And then alerting somebody if there's a huge red flag.
Absolutely. And is it also, I know sometimes people, is it better to be safe than sorry, I guess is my real question.
Absolutely.
Some people don't want to get in someone's business
Right.
in a lot of ways, but
And
is it better to alert someone
I think
just
in
in case?
today's time and age, yes, it's better to alert and to err on the side of caution. We live in a society where unfortunately everybody's airing their business all the time, but then they're very offended when we call them on it or we say, like, hey, what about this? And they're like, well, I wasn't talking to you. I understand you weren't talking to me, but I heard it and I care about you. And I think it has to do with how you do that, not that you're doing it as, oh, I want to turn you into the boss, but you're doing it because you're like, hey, there's some concerns here. Who do I go to? And so knowing who you need to go to wherever you work, whether it's in a school setting and you need to go to residence life, whether it's in a work setting and you need to go to HR, really kind of asking at your work, like, hey, if we're concerned about somebody, what's the best step?